So good morning and welcome to Crumbs Under the Table, Season 2, Episode 7. I'm Kristen Forster. Got these wonderful little white kind of weedy flowers behind me. They are beautiful. This morning I've got fantastic news, but before I show you, we're going to have to walk there. So while I do, you might want to look up this morning's passage, which is Proverbs 3, starting at verse 13, just running down to 18, so just 5 verses, nice and short this morning. And we're going to go via the first stream, which I don't think we've done before. I turn around and try and walk backwards without falling over. It's kind of down by the line of trees behind me. So let's go there. Wrong way. This is the way to the stream. This way to the stream. There it is. Okay, so before we get going properly, this seems like a really good spot to do a quick review of Beat the Tweet. Beat the Tweet. Beat the Tweet. See, I got a logo now, or not a logo, got an intro. Anyway, first thing out, a big shout out to those who took part in the very first ever Beat the Tweet. I've given you the answer to that. That was the common pheasant, but that was Barry Bailey, Francis Harding, Andy Bater. You all had a go. Francis, you were the only one who got it correct though, so a big shout out to you. Well done. I've also given the answer to the second one, which was the quail. Beat the Tweet number 3, which was this sound, was actually a nightingale, but not singing in Berkeley Square. So today we're going to produce a new Beat the Tweet, a new bird song for you to kind of see if you can work out. So I'll stay quiet for a bit. Shh, dogs. Okay, one more go. Let's hear it again. Thank you, you're being very quiet. You're being very quiet. Fantastic. Okay, let's get on with this morning. Let's get the verses out and yeah, you know what I mean. Right, we're heading this way. Okay, so stick with me this morning because there is really some amazing news later, but I'm just going to get there to show you. I'm going to attempt walking and reading the Bible verses though this morning, because there's only 5, it's not too long. So Proverbs chapter 3, starting at verse 13. Happy is the man who finds wisdom. Well, that sounds kind of on the same level of what we've been looking at already, but just want you to notice the 2 words, wisdom and happy. For her good profit is better than getting silver, and her return is better than fine gold. So again, we touched on a bit of that in chapter 2, so it seems like a bit of a repeat. She's more precious than rubies. None of the things you desire compared to her. But now we're going to get into, next couple of verses, some big bold statements. Because the length of days are in her right hand, and her left hand there are riches and honour. There's something of both success and well-being, and certainly physical health. Long days, it's promising a long life. Her ways are the way, Yeah, her ways are the ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. So that word shalom, which, as I say again, is a good summation word for the modern concept of well-being. And she's a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Happy is everyone who retains her. So I just wanted to pick up, so it starts a very kind of simple kind of overview of the whole thing. The whole thing starts again by kind of reviewing that there's something about wisdom that's really worth getting hold of, and you're happy if you get hold of wisdom. Do you remember how we looked at how pleasure, if you like, is a flow down from happiness? You find more things pleasurable in life when you're happy, but if you get more pleasure, you don't necessarily become happy. That's a kind of flow up, and it doesn't happen. Flow ups don't happen. And so similarly in this little passage, these 5 verses, what we're beginning to see is a kind of a flow down from something of the wisdom, the fear of God that is wrapped up with the modern concept of well-being, which therefore includes shalom, our peace, other things that often you'll find when you analyse the kind of the modern science of it. It includes the kind of biblical words of righteousness, peace and joy, as Paul puts it. They're all wrapped up into this concept of well-being. And one of the conclusions of modern kind of science theory on well-being is it really does add length of days. So the promise is not an idle promise. It's actually a genuine promise. It's not a kind of a fait accompli. It's not a kind of my right and I get this if I do this. If I just get a high enough score, because wisdom is not a mental thing. Wisdom is a whole person thing. It's not just about what you know, it's about how you know it. But when you get hold of it, there is a promise of long life and success in life, and it is ironic that those that do get hold of it genuinely do better. They may receive the same salary as their next door neighbour, but they somehow manage to use it well. And it can sound like just a kind of a little truism that I'm throwing out there when I say it like this and to the camera, but it's something that has kind of been established not just in terms of kind of cultural icons. I always think about there's a great moment in The Simpsons where Homer is admiring all of Ned's stuff. Ned is of course the Christian neighbour next door, and how much stuff he's got and how unfair he thinks it is that Ned's got all this stuff, and it turns out that Ned earns considerably less than Homer. There is something about the way you manage life that accumulates wealth when you do it well. But not only that, but it adds health and longevity. So I'm just going to leave some thoughts there for a minute. We're going to just enjoy some moments with the dogs, but we're going to revisit it and let's get our heads around whether we've got the right kind of wisdom and doing it in the right kind of way. What have you got there, Banjo? So it is a hot day and we're just coming up to dog swimming pool, so I very much suspect the dogs will be straight in there as soon as they can. We've been in the stream several times already. What have you got there, Banjo? What have you got there? Oh, he's run straight past. Are you going in the pool? Do you want to go? Okay, drop your stick. You have to drop your stick if you're going in the pool. Or maybe I'll throw it in. What do you think of that? Shall I throw your stick in? You know I might. Okay, it's going in. It's going in. It's going in. Luna's not interested. She doesn't care about your stick. So I promised you some incredible good news this morning, and if I just turn the camera around, I can show them to you. Look. Oh yes. Now that is a sight you don't see every day around here in Cookham. Fantastic news. Some of the best news I've seen for a long, long time around here. My dogs are wise enough to know not to chase them. They're a little bit too big, and of course they risk kind of exposing themselves to the odd alligator if they do. So we'll move on, but let's just enjoy that moment. Whew. Great news, great news. So that total kind of random chance happening on those good news gives a great opportunity to actually kind of introduce the kind of the development of the science of and psychology of well-being, and we'll see actually how well it fits with these verses that we're looking at in Proverbs 3. So Proverbs 3, as I say, roots back to Solomon. So it starts kind of 900 BC-ish, I think, is Solomon's temple, about 940 something I think it is, and 950, maybe a bit later even, but anyway, and obviously the Old Testament kind of gets wound up just before the 400 BC. Then during 300 BC, 300 to 400, along comes Aristotle, and he starts thinking about the issue of happiness and its effect and impact on life, and so he writes about it, and he gives it a title, because he notices that not all happiness is the same, and he notices there's something he refers to as hedonic happiness, and there's also a kind of happiness which he calls eudaimonia. And that's the connection with the good news that we've just seen. Because the good in good news, evangelion, see what I did there? The good news, the evangel, makes us evangelicals, makes us do evangelism. The U bit is the same as in eudaimonic. Eudaimonic, which means good, and daimonic, which you might spot from the word demon, is good-spirited. It's kind of good life. It's what he called the good life, or that's how we sometimes translate it. And he noticed that not all happiness is eudaimonic. Some is what he refers to as hedonic. And so that is a good 600 years after Solomon, 100 years after the end of the Bible, he comes up with this theory. And so we have these words, and what we're going to see as we look at what's happened in the 21st century in terms of psychology is we put some science behind this principle. That there is a type of happiness, it's not all happiness, there is a type of happiness that actually is good for your health and good for your prosperity. Good, so I found myself a nice secluded shady spot, so this would be a good place to kind of just finish unpacking that little bit of the history of eudaimonia, of good happiness, and it's really key because you think about it, Jesus' key message is the Sermon on the Mount. It starts with 8 happies, happy, 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 and then it's got some more happies thrown in as well for good measure. So there's something about this happy which is fundamental to the Christian life. It's a type of happy. And so anyway, as I said, so Aristotle kind of had made this observation, this hedonic happiness, which is about pleasure happiness. It's the sugar rush of dopamine, etc., etc. You know, I eat a piece of chocolate, that gives me pleasure. I have sex, that gives me pleasure. And it's not quite as simple as this, the way I sometimes used to put it, but it's not far off, which is that on the whole, when our senses are satisfied, we feel pleasure. When the soul is satisfied, we feel happiness. And when the soul, you see, starts to bring something mental in. Eudaimonia, as we're going to see, has been discovered to be related to purposeful happiness. And purpose comes out of the head, so wisdom becomes happiness of a particular type. So we have this interesting flow in the book of Proverbs, which is fear of the Lord produces wisdom, although if you haven't got that, the first little bit of wisdom you could get is to try and pursue the Lord. If you pursue him, he does answer you and he gives you wisdom. So fear of the Lord, so rooted out of that experience of God and acknowledgement and reverence towards him, produces a kind of a wisdom which gives birth to a type of happiness. That's the kind of the flow of Proverbs, and Proverbs 3, the verses we're looking at this morning in particular. It's got that kind of flow, and shalom, well-being, comes out of that type of happiness. So, as I say, it was one of those things that psychologists used to throw about: eudaimonia, hedonia, hedonic happiness, eudaimonic happiness. But I think it was in the 2000s, and it was originally some work done by a lady called Barbara Fredrickson, who worked at the University of North Carolina. And she decided to do some work on what she thought would be the benefits of hedonic happiness, i.e. people who get an awful lot of kind of pleasure in life, she thought probably be healthier and happier, you see. So, so she was researching that, but she found actually that wasn't the case. They weren't. But what she did find was a very, very strong correlation between purposeful happiness and health, and actually even just general happiness. So people were, and so it's got that, and so she then collaborated with a guy from UCLA, Steve Cole, I think it was, and they did a whole kind of load of work, and they used phrases like eudaimonia, purposeful happiness, and so on, and it's purpose that has meaning to it. Which is, and of course, meaning is something that very specifically we do tend to get out of our relationship with the Lord. If we don't have a relationship with the Lord, people find meaning in their relationships with other people. It's something that comes out of our connection. But ultimately, all purpose and meaning comes from God the Father. You've got two types of purpose in life. Either purpose you make yourself, and that's an awful lot of effort. That's what the existentialists try and do. Or purpose that's given to you. Philosophically, we refer to it as existential purpose, i.e. I try really hard and I produce a life full of meaning. Or essential purpose, which is part of my essence, is I have purpose. And that's much more in line with the Christian revelation. Sorry, my dogs are really going for it there, aren't they? Yeah, is that what you think, Banjo? Is that what you think? Anyway, I'm losing my thread now. Maybe what I need to do is move somewhere else to finish this, because then that gives us a little break from all this aggro with the dogs. Hopefully you could see them on that one. Good, well hopefully this will be the last time I actually have to stand and talk to this camera, because the dogs are getting kind of a bit antsy. And when we place everything together, splice it all together, it will actually hopefully make sense. Going back to Barbara Fredrickson and Steve Cole's work, they do all this kind of research, and it's been investigated continually since. Because what they discovered was that those who had purposeful happiness with meaning behind it, so it's something of wisdom first, and out of that wisdom we find purpose, which then actually produces happiness. It's that flow down that I've been talking about. Out of that, if you have that, it's a better indication of length of life and general health and well-being than things like smoking and obesity were. That's kind of a big discovery. And they actually were able to demonstrate how it affects the immune system, and the immune system is far healthier when you're a happy person. And it's the type of happiness that doesn't come from pleasure seeking. It's the kind of happiness that comes by having a purpose. You know, I think it was Nietzsche who first said, "He who has a why can endure any how." We understand that meaning gives a context that somehow means even in circumstances that wouldn't naturally be happy, our purpose gives us well-being. And that's actually another conclusion of work by, what's his guy's name now? I can see his face. I can't think of his name. He's done various things on TED and others. Wrote a book called Stumbling into Happiness. Daniel, can't think of his name now. Anyway, but he talks about synthetic happiness. Synthetic happiness is far more important than natural happiness. Natural happiness is the happiness you get when you get what you want. Synthetic happiness is the happiness you generate when life around you is not giving you the natural. And of course, it's your purpose that is one of the things that enables us to do that, enables us to have synthetic happiness. We have purpose in life. And so, to cut a very long story short, starting over 1,000 years before Jesus, there was a foundation laid for a type of happiness that was related to a wisdom that comes out of a relationship with a good God. That in itself generates long life, and of course there's exceptions. You know, you can be happy today and get hit by a bus tomorrow, but you average it out over everybody. And those that live longer and live happier and live better, normally have got something that gives them a flow to discover a type of happiness that allows them to synthesize. I don't mean that in a negative word, but to be happy in all circumstances. And that's one of the works and gifts of the Holy Spirit to us, and one of the things that the gospel does for us. So eudaimonia is something that flows out of good news. Good news, see what I did there? So anyway, that's enough about that, because otherwise I can go on for hours on this subject. I can go on literally for hours, so we better not do that. I'm going to allow you to enjoy a little bit more of this incredible poppy field and the antics of the dogs, and I'll see you next time on Crumbs Under the Table. I've been Kristen Forster. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It encourages me to keep doing those, and please share these videos. Not enough people watch them. I would love them to go viral. I suppose everyone who does stuff on YouTube wants them to go viral, but you know what I mean. Encourage me by your support in those ways. It doesn't cost anything. So see you next time. Bye. Okay, less of the dogs running around, but final prayer. So Father, I do thank you that actually fear of the Lord produces wisdom. Wisdom gives us purpose. Purpose makes everything feel better. It's proper kind of meaningful happiness. And that therefore, Lord, that you've given every single one of us the means for a fulfilled life. And that is quite a remarkable thing. Father, I'm praying it and staying it at the same time. For God to create a world with so many billions of people who can all know meaning and purpose and happiness out of their relationship with you, because it's a commodity of which there isn't any end. There is no end to that resource. Everything else runs dry, runs out. But you live forever, you last forever. So thank you, Jesus. Thank you, and for another beautiful day. Another beautiful day. Bless us in this week ahead. Amen.